Hi, everybody. Welcome on behalf of AACRAO. Thank you guys so much for coming in and taking a part of your afternoon to join us to discuss the role of the modern registrar. We're going to go ahead and let folks kind of take a virtual seat. So because the registration numbers are so large, I'm going to give it closer to a minute. So it's going to be a minute of maybe a little bit of awkward silence, and then we'll get started with the tech stuff. But we're so excited to have you guys joining us. Again, welcome in. Thank you so much for being here. The awkward silence will now start.
Well, like Doug's like,
I love the introductions in the chat. If you want to tell us who you are and where you're from.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Always love learning that.
Definitely.
we should have like background music or something for this part, right?
I was talking to Mike about that. I should have something like some smooth jazz or just something
for that 1 minute. Yeah.
Right. Oh, awesome. Jessica, Patrick, Rodney.
I do that for my all staff meetings. Sometimes they appreciate it. Sometimes they're like, what are we listening to?
I guess it depends on the genre, right?
Right.
Oh,
but to those of you guys who are in the chat feature,
look at that.
So much.
That is fantastic.
Absolutely. Wow. Oh, this is so exciting. All righty, guys. Well, I'll say it's been 45 seconds. But again, on behalf of AACRAO, for those of you guys just joining in, welcome to our webinar today. We're really excited to have a host of panelists joining us today. And just so you're aware, we're going to be in Zoom webinar today. So for those of you guys who aren't aware or haven't used Zoom webinar before, I want to just make a couple of key pointers to some features that will help you guys engage. I know a lot of you guys have already found the chat section, and thank you so much for letting us know who you are and where you're from. During the course of the webinar, you might have a couple of questions, and that's where I want to point you to the Q&A section on the bottom. And that's a great place to ask your questions, and so they don't get lost. I know that our panelists are going to be saving a bit of time towards the end to make sure they're addressed, but I also know that some of them might be typing the questions in the response. And so you never know if your question's being asked. So I'd actually encourage you to click on that Q&A section with me right now and see that there are those 3 buttons on the very top. You've got your open, answered, and dismissed. So for those questions, that are already answered, they'll be in the answered section, and you can always browse to see if your question that you want to ask has already been answered. But again, we will have a bit of time at the very end. If you guys have any questions at all, text specific, for example, audio, please feel free to message the panelists only. That's an option in the chat feature when you're typing in your message. You can choose who you're sending it to. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Wendy. Wendy, welcome in, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Christina, and fantastic to see that scrolling chat of where everybody's from today. And I hope you're all having a fantastic day. In Tucson, it is a balmy, I think 60-ish degrees right now. So very nice weather here, and I hope you're all enjoying your day as well. I'm the Director of Research at AACRAO, and we are going to talk for just a couple of minutes on basically why we're here, and then open it up Brady Bunch style and have all the panelists do the talking and address your questions and their thoughts on the role of the modern registrar. Christina's already gone over most of the housekeeping, so we'll just skip past that one there. Today, it's myself, again, the Director of Research at AACRAO, and I also want to introduce Kim from Modern Campus.
Hey, everybody. I'm Kim Conrad. I am a marketer over here at Modern Campus. We are co-sponsoring this webinar and also the white paper with the research, which Christina just threw in the chat. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, that's kind of the anchor piece of what we're talking about today. So I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And just a little bit, I think most of you probably know who DigArc is. DigArc is the company that has AACRAO, Curriculog, Register section. A few years ago, Modern Campus acquired DigArc. So if you're not familiar with that whole story, I won't bore you with it, but Modern Campus has basically acquired 5 or 6 different companies in order to follow the student on their entire journey of college, from high school, of how they choose a college, to registration, to being engaged on campus, to alumni and continuing ed. So that's kind of our whole story. But today we're going to focus on the DigArc part of it, because that's probably the part that is most relevant to you all, but just wanted to make that connection for you that DigArc is now part of Modern Campus. And if you have any questions, we're not going to talk products or anything in this webinar today, but if you do have any questions about anything in the DigArc suite or in the entire Modern Campus company, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to get in touch with you.
Thank you, Kim. If the link to this white paper was placed in the chat section. So this is available to you and you can just log in, download it and get it. It is the second part of a project we're working on with the Modern Campus group. The first part was a 60-second survey in July that fed this Modern Campus and the white paper on it. And the white paper is based upon the folks you're going to talk to today. So they participated in a panel, a roundtable discussion, and that resulted in this white paper for you. One of the things we heard during that is kind of like, what does the registrar, oops, I'm sorry, Canva. What does the registrar do, or what do you think about the registrar from a non-registrar's perspective? And I want to put this out there. So if you're a non-registrar, one of the folks talked about this, like the wizard behind the curtain in the Wizard of Oz. We don't really know all of what they do, the registrar, or how they do it, but at the same time, we also do not fully understand all of what they can do. And that's an interesting point. So what do they do on a regular basis is probably not known very widely by a large audience, right? Because it's like, hey, I want to be a registrar. I know exactly what that means and what that entails. But also to go past the modern or the more traditional understanding of the registrar and moving into this role of helping institutions transform their institution to student-centric practices and policies. We had some initial thoughts from them on student centricity, and just put them up here for a second, about being aware of the use of specific terminology. We use that language all the time, and what not our students don't necessarily understand. Understanding the role of the registrar as an educator, empathy and understanding students' perspectives, placing the student at the center of decision-making, and highlighting that there's no one size fits all. That's becoming more and more part of it, is that we make these policies that and practices we hope address like 80% of the population perhaps, but we have to remember there's that other 20% or more that policy or practice does not easily fit, and we have to understand that that we have to work other ways around it. So our panelists are here, and this is the beautiful faces here, and we are not going to spend the 2 minutes introducing everyone because it's going to take up quite a bit of our time here today. We'd rather have you hear from them. They will introduce themselves when they first answer a question, but this is who we are and have here today for you to ask questions of and to understand their perspectives on the role of the modern registrar. As you can see, some are registrars and some are not, so it's going to be unique perspectives. I'm going to stop sharing now and move on to asking the first question. Okay, thank you, everyone. The first question we have for you today, panelists, is when you think about how the position of the registrar can be purposely empowered to help improve student centricity, what does that look like to you? And there are sub-questions to that. What are the challenges to the approach? And how does a registrar gain buy-in for that approach? So again, what does the registrar be purposely empowered to improve student centricity? What does that look like to you? Challenges, and how do you gain buy-in for that? Who'd ever like to go first?
Julia, I nominate you to go first.
Doug, you're such a helper.
That's what I'm here for.
I think so I'm Julia Pomerick. I work as the University Registrar at the University of Oregon. And I think part of it is calling people in, right? So the idea of if the registrar is someone who has taken a good use of the fact that we're kind of sit centrally to things, we interact with students, with faculty, with staff all the time. And if we are that hub of information and connection and impact, then if we're helpful, people will bring us in, right? And so part of it is countering whatever might be a sense of the office of no, to say that we're the office of yes, and yes, we could do that, and it would impact these other people. Yes, we could do that, and we need to change this policy. So to be student-centered, I think the very best institutions should be registrar office centered. Like, we know things and we have data and we're a hub, And if we pull people in and call people in and invite people in to conversations, then we have helped create that culture and that expectation that there are conversations. I think many times in my work experience, I've thought, well, if my office, if I didn't have this group meet, would anyone? So I think we need to be connectors of information and people. So that's what I would say. Thank you so much, Doug. I will call in Alex. Alex, what do you think?
Thanks, Julia. I think to me, it's also thinking about how can we simplify process and policy. I think so many times policy over the years have become snowballs, or like we don't even know why there is a policy that exists, and it was to like solve something that happened 20 years ago, and like putting policy in place to the exception as opposed to like what is best for most students. And so I think being student-centric to me is really just about asking why we do different things, and then seeing how we can improve process and policy, and really making it more transparent for students. Success we had this last year was taking a secret committee that made tuition appeals decisions. So if you wanted to get a refund on your tuition that you paid because of a late withdrawal, there was a secret committee that some people knew about that they could go, but it wasn't available to all students and even to all advisors. So it was very word of mouth, which at an institution with 50,000 students is a little strange. So we took that process, got buy-in to actually make it a known entity and put a transparent process out for students. So we've seen a big increase in the amount of people who've had access to the tuition appeal. And so I think things like that, asking the question, and then everyone I've found really wants to buy in to making things some more simple for students as well. And I think I will pick on Jenna.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate what you and Julia said. And Julia, I think I love the word hub to describe where we are. I think Nexus was used in the white paper, which is exactly where we are. And I'm fortunate to be kind of the registrar liaison within the School of Public Health to the University Registrar, and I'm situated in the Office of Student Services. So relationships are so easy for me to make here, and I hope that you don't hear background noise of my colleagues. We're a very excitable crew in here. But I wanted to, I guess, say a few things. One is, I think by being student-centric, we're serving the university. So it's not like an either or, right? We've talked about kind of the bottom line and retention and student success and all of those things that make us successful. And wanted to offer just an example, Alex, like you did from a few months ago, where my office produces all the academic probation letters, right? And so I'm noticing there's an uptick in academic probation letters. And then I start looking at students who are getting withdrawal fails rather than withdrawals, and withdrawal fails look like a fail. And so let's set a percent point at which 75% into the semester, you can get a withdrawal fail. Before that, there's no withdrawal fails. And I'm looking forward to seeing kind of with our advising and then partnering with academic support resources, our academic probation rate go down, because we now have a policy where faculty can't give withdrawal fails 3 weeks into the semester when a student withdraws and they're not being successful. So I think that emphasizes kind of the data, the relationships, the networking, and the policy piece as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Carolyn.
Thanks, Jenna. And there's a lot of conversation there that we could peel apart, but I know we only have a little bit of time. I also want to make sure that we acknowledge AACRAO and Modern Campus, but definitely Wendy for bringing this group together. And all registrars, you guys are fantastic. You do phenomenal work. And I think a lot of people do not give enough credit to registrars, knowing that you hold up the institutions that we are a part of. And in doing that, then there's also this process where registrars continue to meet goals. They continue to collect records and data. but that other duties is assigned for their job description keeps growing, even though we're asking for more, but yet no promotion, no pay, no additional resources, right? Just putting that out there. But when we answer the question that's at hand, that's been posed, I go back to my childhood days, and the best gift I ever got in Christmas was a Viewmaster. And if you think of the Viewmaster, it's this red childlike binoculars with changeable reels. And when you look at that, the registrar position are these sort of binoculars, right? That's remain consistent, we can see in. And in terms of empowering, we're empowered to change the reels based on how institutions change or ebb and flow. And that student centricity is one reel that we've been putting in. But none of the other reels go away. We're still doing military, we're still doing CLEP, we're still doing Cambridge, all these processes. And therefore the challenge for me is, if we are data informed, and IU can't say it, guys, we have phenomenal registrars, I'm biased, right? And Indiana University registrars continue to ensure that we shine as IU. And they shine because they give us data that makes sense. Like you mentioned, Jenna, they help us identify the trends, where there are friction processes that are not working well, that we need to make some change. But if they're not at the table, we don't get that trend data. All we get are past, or sort of records of the past. Here's what we've done. Here's the persistence. Here's the enrollment. Here's the retention, but nothing futuristic. And so as we move forward, my goal, hopefully, for registrars is that we can look at the job description. AACRAO, I think, can continue to do that and do that really well, so that the job description really captures the work that they're doing, and they get support, both financially and other, to be able to do that work well, but that it moves from just student movement data to actual future data using that trend. And the second is that they become a part of that shared governance process, that they're defining and modifying friction processes with the knowledge they have, but valuing curriculum and plans and credits, and not just giving that to faculty. So there's a lot that we can do, and I'll save some of my thoughts for later as I call on Victoria.
Thank you. I have the unique position of representing the small universities, small schools in AACRAO. I'm from a very small Christian university, and one of the things that just pops to mind immediately for me is that as a small institution, we are very high touch. Historically, if a student comes in, we'll do anything to help them. But that gets harder and harder to do. And as technology improves, which we'll talk probably more about later, the students really need to be empowered to access that technology on their own. So one of the things that we have really worked hard on at my institution, at previous institutions I worked at, is to the old adage of, it's better to teach them how to fish than to give them a fish. So we've tried to stop giving them fish, but actually continue that high touch by showing them how to access it themselves, as opposed to just say, here are the instructions, go figure it out. So that's one of the things that we really have proven to be. Students will have better access to what they need. They'll be empowered to own their academic journey better. It's a really powerful thing for the students when they realize, I have 24/7 access. I don't have to wait until Monday morning at 8 o'clock to ask my question. I can get it whenever I need it, kind of thing. So that's one of the things that we've really sought to focus on.
Victoria, I'm going to jump in there because I agree that there's 24/7 access, but in order to make it useful, especially in terms of student centricity, you have to communicate in ways that students will understand and will be able to navigate and find. And so one of the things that we've done at Mason, hi, I'm Doug McKenna, I'm the University Registrar at George Mason University. It's the largest and most diverse research public institution in the Commonwealth of Virginia. One thing that we have done is to actually go through and look at all of the frequently asked questions, how we have tagged some of those knowledge-based articles behind the scenes. Over the last 3 years, separate and apart from COVID, we stood up the Mason Student Services Center. And so there's a portal that students can use, access, and search and review for knowledge-based articles. but if they can't find what they're looking for, they're going to come in anyway. And if we're not communicating in ways, in the language that they are anticipating, nobody knows what a registrar is. Some of my staff don't understand the full breadth of what registrars' offices do. And so working on building that level of understanding internally within the office and across the campus, it has to extend to educating the students of what we do and how we do it, or in terms of what they are trying to accomplish. And so as we think about literally the words that we use, the language that we use to label something or to communicate about a particular thing, Mason has a very large first generation student population. And so when you talk about, shared governance or academic regulations, like you have to, it's not dumbing it down. And I reject that notion outright. It is using language that people understand. People know that there are rules. They may not put together academic regulations are the rules that apply to me. And so our job as we place the student at the center is to make sure that those connections are able to be made. And there are a couple of questions that we can talk about with technology and ways that we move that forward. But I did want to jump in and just say, if they can't find it, it's not there. And so if you want to be student-centric, you need to be able to highlight things and communicate in ways that your student population will understand. And that'll change from institution to institution. So understanding who your students are is a really big part of how we are successful in our jobs.
Yeah,
Amanda, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, Doug, I wanted to piggyback on that because at the University of Delaware, we have been having, the recurring conversations about what our messages say, how long are they, how can we get to the point, right? We all want to do things very efficiently, and we also want to deliver the information just in time. So I think communicating in that plain language that they can understand and embracing that we may need to do it in multiple mechanisms, email, text, portals, whatever systems we're using, understanding what our students—
Playing with a banner.
Right.
Behind it.
Yeah. Table tents do work still, so understanding, what those messages are and how we need to deliver the information is really important. And I want to circle back because I think it was Julia who talked about the registrar's office being the hub. And I can't agree more, which also means that whether we're in the conversation from the beginning or whether we're brought in at the end, if the conversation has not revolved around student success, we will be there at some point, and it's our job to remind folks in the room to think through what this means from a student-centric model, whatever decision or conversation that we're having. As I was thinking about how to empower registrars to be student-centric or to improve student centricity on campus, I also reminded myself that I don't have to wait for somebody to tell me how to do my job well. And so, if you are at an institution that is lacking this articulation of a student-centric strategic priority, you can start it in your office. Because of where we sit, there are so many processes that we can stop and think, how does that form process flow? What does the student have to do? Are they having to walk all the way across campus to deliver a form? How can we get that to them in a more efficient manner, and many times help ourselves in that process?
If I may jump in, Amanda, you're absolutely right. And I saw everybody sort of putting their hands up. And when we do look at empowerment and empower in that process, and you take out the E for energy, right? So if you do what Einstein's process, Wendy, so the E equals MC squared, and the E is for energy, and everybody sort of coming together, and M is for the mass trying to move this sort of big ship, right? Then we're left with power, and it's about power distribution and recognizing who has the power, what is within my control to make a change now, and what is it that I do need to send to some other group to share in that process. So I agree 100%. Sorry, Wendy, go ahead.
No, not at all. Not at all. This is what I wanted to have you guys do. And I love how you're tag teaming here. I want to start with Amanda with that part of the follow-up question here. And if you guys don't mind spending 3 or 4 minutes or so total, maybe 5, talking about this part about how does the registrar gain the buy-in? So we have registrars from our career profile survey where some of their challenges listed are that they don't have as much of a voice at their institution. And they would like to have more of a voice in this student centricity enrollment management component. How would you recommend that registrars who don't currently have the positions that you guys are reflecting that you have, and that you're reflecting that your registrars have, if you're not registrars, how do they get there? How do they get that buy-in?
Right. I know that when we talked about this in the development of the white paper, folks heard me use the term reputation management, right? We manage our reputation, which means that we have to develop a reputation for being approachable, being good listeners, being good communicators, letting people know what we're doing, what's going on, why we're doing what we're doing, and more than anything, being a problem solver as you listen around campus to students, to academic departments, really taking to heart what you're hearing and figuring out ways to develop solutions that help everyone across campus. I mean, sometimes being student-centric doesn't mean just delivering to the student themselves. It's not a direct impact, but it's delivering just-in-time information to their advisor so that their advisor has the tools they need when they're meeting for an advising. So I often talk about focusing on the student impact to drive conversation, because I find this is really an effective way when I'm starting a conversation with somebody who's new to campus, or when I was new to the University of Delaware, to begin developing that reputation for openness and idea generation and just receptiveness to change conversations in general.
And I would add, Amanda, to what you were saying, make connections across, right? Sometimes we think the only way to get power or voice is to go up, and sometimes across is very powerful. So think of sort of peer leaders at your institution, or people kind of one or two away on an organizational chart, but meetings with, peers and advising with peers in other areas is fabulous, because then you're in their conversation, you're in a sense of, oh, that's a weirdness. Oh, that does bump into your office. That bumps into my office. How do we make that work? Because I think, again, at good institutions, there's lots of collaboration happening that's almost unacknowledged, because of course I have coffee with that person and we talk about holds and we say, oh, we should make that better. And it doesn't always kind of bubble up even to another level because we fix it here. A colleague of mine talks about registrars, the people who fix problems that you didn't even know you had, and so some of it maybe is being more boastful about the things that we are doing. Like, oh, we did this and this and this. Oh, we collaborated here, here, and here. So I think, Amanda, it was you that said you can kind of claim this power. You don't have to wait for someone to give it to you. And then if the story is that registrars have this power, then look at what influence we're having at institutions across the world.
And Julia, it's something that I think about in that space is to be politically savvy, but not political. And I think that if you understand maybe other people's motivations, or what it is they're trying to do, then you can make those connections. And I think, Amanda, to your point about being the problem solvers, the problem is how to support the university and how to support students, not how big does the registrar's office get, or how beloved am I as I walk across campus. That's not important. What is important is the ability to make those connections and to be in the conversation. And I think helping people get there, but also understanding what's important to them. So that you can make those connections and play in and help them achieve the goals that is being set for their office as well. I have found it is helpful.
I totally agree. It's about relationships and knowing your audience and that reputation management. And I like to have conversations within the School of Public Health, asking different stakeholders, what are the ways in which you see we can work together? Tell me what struggles you're facing that are kind of within my circle that we can talk about improvements, and just asking those questions about how we can partner together. What are those pain points? Can we find solutions for them? A recent example of this is students were registering in classes and not looking at notes. Well, we easily talked to the university registrar and got prerequisites programmed in or academic plans programmed in. And it's just one of those no-brainers But it just takes somebody to ask a question and to think about it. And then in terms of working with faculty, I know I'm situated in the School of Public Health, and folks situated in other places might not agree, but data speaks. And so I've also found that in working with faculty members, coming prepared with data to identify a problem, to identify a trend, in addition to kind of coming with some potential solutions, is also helpful.
Jenna, that's a perfect segue to our next question, if we can kind of shift a little bit. So you all are talking a lot about things that trends you've noticed, data you've used. Can you speak a little bit, anyone, to how technology has played a part in the evolving role? So whether that's technology that you use within your department, maybe it's technology that students use. We talked about, the 24/7 access to things. And can we talk about maybe how that's helped you and maybe how that's caused friction? I know technology is supposed to help us, and sometimes it ends up causing more headaches. So how has technology played a role in sort of this evolving role of the registrar?
I definitely think it's been a big part. And some of the other duties as assigned in terms of what registrars are and what registrars do, we really have to understand what technology can do for us and what technology cannot do. And then we have understanding what technology can do. Then there's like a world of who is the right vendor or what is the right product to address the problem that we're solving. And some of this comes back to the relationship management piece, because there is generally a central IT office on campus. And if there is another office that is more overworked than the registrar's office, I would say that it is likely your central IT support. And so having a good relationship with them, understanding sort of what the university's direction for technology overall might be. So for example, Mason just announced that we are back to being a Salesforce first institution. I don't know exactly what that means, but we announced it like 4 years ago, and then we rescinded it, and we were like, hold on, we're not really in it, but now we're back. And so as we move forward, one of the things that we need to assess within our office is how does this, or how will this integrate with Salesforce? And insert any other vendor name into that sentence. And that's one of the considerations that registrars have to make. And so it's not just understanding the student data, it's not just understanding the institutional policies and practices. There is a big part of the modern registrar's responsibilities that is actively engaged with what types of technology are out there, what the institution is using and interested in using, and then filtering all of those things through to say, what is the best product that will address the problem we're trying to address? Those are not easy conversations to have sometimes. And sometimes you get to an answer that then there isn't funding, there isn't political support. Somebody else in a different office has already said, no, we want to use this other thing. And so again, like those relationships come into play where you have to sort of build consensus and then get buy-in.
Agreed 100%, Doug. And I think you hit most of the thoughts that I had originally. One new piece that I may be able to add is the more we try to tell the student story rather than the institution's story, it necessitates us being able to train the technology that we have brought in to communicate with each other so that it reports the story that we want to tell. So we have a history of somebody knows about the whole, some other system knows about the academic discipline, another knows about the bursar holes, another knows about the marriage and divorces. But by the time we work with the student to pull all of that together, we're going into many systems that don't consistently tell the whole story. So putting student story at the front end would be something that we could do with technology more effectively as we move forward.
I'll jump in and say too, that I think technology has the opportunity to ideally help us be more efficient and more student-centric. And then that allows us the time and the bandwidth to make partnerships across the university. We recently implemented a degree audit software across the university and have had great benefits from it. And so I think it's about what Victoria mentioned earlier about teaching the students how to use the software, right? Teaching them how to fish. But then it's also, okay, now you have this time back. And so maybe you're having more specific conversations with students where you're really utilizing your expertise in a particular area. And I'm thinking specifically of our academic advisors who no longer are reviewing curriculum sheets, right? But can have intentional conversations about linking them to faculty and alumni and different research opportunities in their specific area, because we have this degree audit software that's making one part of an advising appointment significantly shorter. And I really think that those things help maximize what our reach can be.
Thank you. I want to add something here because it's something I've noticed, and it may exist at your institutions, it may not. But one of the challenges of the registrar, as you guys have mentioned, the role, more and more of it's technology. And either you're leading that yourself because of the size of your institution, or you're delegating it to other people. But the management of several different types of technology comes on board. What we've noticed in our technology reviews when we go on campus, AACRAO, is that there's often more than one technology solution aimed at doing the same thing. And it has been adopted by, this department or that department or the other. So can you talk a bit about how you potentially could wrangle the fact that you have competing technologies, or how do you reduce that and get everybody on board to the same one? So because students are then also being asked to interact with all of these different user interfaces.
Wendy, I would say that one way is to have the student at the center, right? Why does the student need to know this, this, and this? I mean, think of the frustrations we might have about all the things we need to pull up on our screens, and we get paid to do it, right? And our students don't get paid to learn our technologies. And another is, others have mentioned that if anyone is more overworked than us, it would be our IT colleagues. And they don't need, so I think they're completely with us in partnership about not wanting to have to support a CRM for this college and that college and that college, but to consolidate. Our university did that a while ago with classroom scheduling, open the conversation to scheduling on campus. And we went away from something that we thought worked really well for us to something that was going to work for the entire university, student-centered in that for safety and security and risk, we wanted to know where students were, whether they were in class or in some other kind of activity scheduled on campus. And so that was an example of one scheduling software where before we had 2 or 3. And you also have to, kind of do some give and take when you consolidate. There are some benefits and there are some things you kind of lose a little bit or have to figure out in a different way. So I think that's another place where we, as a hub and as people who see different kind of impacts, can say, okay, we can adjust that. And I think generally speaking, it's also a way that we can have a role with technology to say, hello, academic colleagues, we're going to this other student information system. It can't do this exactly the same way. So instead of saying, here's what we must do, to have more of a sense of what is your outcome? What's the goal? Can we meet it a different way? To be that kind of interpreter or that sort of middle person to be an explainer can help as well.
Julia, just kind of piggybacking on what you said about putting the student at the center of the experience, we're going through that right now. We have a degree audit tool and we have a plan tool and we have an advising tool, right? There's all these interfaces and, most of the solutions were cutting edge, some are custom development, and they don't talk very well to each other. And that becomes a really big friction point that can become a hindrance for students, right? It can be the antithesis of student-centric. And so you know, some institutions are striving to get to a place that we already are, and we're in the next step of, and then how do we make it work better for the student, right? We've added all these things and they don't necessarily talk. And I'm in a lot of conversations where I have to ask, you know, because we have so many solutions, is nightly enough? Like, can we really rely on nightly updates for the student experience? And in some cases it's yes. I mean, if it is our census report and we just need tonight's data tomorrow to be able to report something out or make some decisions, or finance needs something, sure. But when we're talking about change of majors, registration, things that roll into degree audit, nightly is not enough. So we certainly have to be the voice of what that student experience is to ensure that their needs are being met.
Agreed,
you.
Amanda. And in talking through it, some of my colleagues, and as you know, I'm system, so assistant vice president for cross IU system. And we have tons of system on one campus and then 7 campuses and then within those, right? And one of the biggest things that I believe has continued to work for us, and there's more and better work to do, right? So we could get better at it, but it's focusing on standards. So if we're going to have student centricity as the key, how are we measuring that? And then ensuring that standards do not necessarily translate to standardization. We don't have to do all the same thing, but we have to be clear on the standards that we want and ensure that those systems can allow us to track the progress on those standards.
Carolyn, I think that's so important. I also makes me think about using systems, what they're meant to do. I don't know if at your institution, sometimes people have a hammer, so they see everything as a nail. And they're like, oh, I can solve that with this, and I can use this system to do that. And, you know, sometimes vendors might say that their thing can do all of the things. But I think alignment around what are the different systems and what are they used for, so that when you go to solve that problem as problem solvers, you know which tools to use in which place. And I think alignment with that with your technology partners is so helpful, because yeah, I found like just really defining what we use different systems for has moved the conversation on trying to create things better for students.
Thank you. I'm going to put Tori on a spot here, I think, because you were talking about technology earlier, but you also have a small institution perspective, which the vast majority of institutions in this country are small, right? So I'd love to hear your perspective on this discussion about technology, because it's, I would assume, quite different at a smaller institution, but my perception might be completely wrong.
It is, but it isn't. I didn't hear anything that just like, oh, really? That happens to you? Because it all happens to us. We happen to be in the process, the early stages of converting to a new SIS. This is my 3rd time doing that at different institutions. And it is a, you know, if you've been through it, you know the process. It's overwhelming, especially from the registrar's viewpoint. But one of the things that as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, we are not fighting. We're having conversations with the vendor that, well, this is the way you should do it. And we say, but that's not the way we do it. The way we best serve our students is for you to figure out how to do it our way, using your technology and adapting that. But the technology needs to fit the expectation of the institution for its students. And so that's kind of what I keep thinking is maybe the multiple technologies are the right thing for that institution or for those students, as long as they talk to each other, they agree with each other. Heaven forbid the students get different answers from different people. You know, that's always a frustrating thing. But just the idea of making sure the technology, as it's programmed, as it's used, is meeting your mission for your students, your mission as an institution, but your mission as you're seeking for what your students will get when they're finished with your institution. So that's kind of where I come down.
Thank you.
Victoria, I might add that, oh shoot, what was I going to add? Something that sometimes there is energy around implementation, and then the energy is over before the implementation is really fully in. You know, I think most people who helped install something new, right, say, oh wait, but we still needed more attention and more time and more of our IT colleagues' time. And so if we can also be people who say, yes, it's working, right? We have the 80% in, the 20% would actually still be helpful, right? I think we don't always get the full use out of our systems because we there's another one to put in, right? And so I think that's something we can help with.
And there's a question in
go
the
ahead, Doug.
chat from Brian about shouldn't institutions rethink processes during technical implementations or shifts in technologies? And yes, and sometimes upon rethinking, you get to an answer that is you affirm the process that is in place. And then, as Victoria was pointing out, sometimes then you have to go back to the vendor and say, well, that's not how it works here, or that's not how we want to do it. That does speak again to understanding the knowledge, understanding the processes in place currently, understanding what the technology is and can do, and then marrying those two in a way that makes sense for your own institution, for the faculty, staff who might be engaging with that particular technology solution, and then also with the students who are likely, I say likely, most of our technological solutions are invisible to the student, and they should be. And so if we're doing it right, the students really don't know that we've changed catalog management systems. They really don't care that we've changed the underlying engine of the degree audit or the underlying engine of the registration system, and they shouldn't care. And that's really one of those things where we'd like to be able to swap things out without having anyone be like, this is totally different. What happened? And so the more that you can focus on making the change either an improvement or transparent to the end user, faculty, staff, or students, I think is really important and critical as you think through implementing technological solutions for whatever given issue you're trying to address.
And Wendy, I know you were going to transition, but I wanted to add just one thing to what Doug said and Brian's question. You shouldn't wait for a tech shift to examine your processes, right? That should be an ongoing process.
Correct. And I am trying to shift because as we talked about in our roundtable discussion that led to this, we could talk about this for a long time, all these different things around the role of the registrar, because it has really shifted. I mean, what it used to be, it is so much more. We have some questions that if you want to tap in the chat, it'd be great to answer them. I wanted to hit those, like lists, if you can list the degree audit solution you currently use so folks can see that. If you want to put that in the chat, panelists, please. We also have a question about how to simplify curriculum and reduce choice overload, that whole paradox of choice. That could be a webinar in and of itself, but if you have some early thoughts, if you want to put that in the chat. We have some Q&As popping up, technology and FERPA, as we continue to implement new systems. Registrars keep FERPA in the forefront while maintaining that student data is secured and being used in proper manner. That's also, if somebody wants to tackle that one and answer the questions, answer that specific question, that'd be great. When it's answered, it moves to the second column. But I do want to get back to this broader, because we could go off on so many tangents. We get back to this broader issue of the modern registrar, and you can either address one of two questions, your choice, each of you. What would you say is the biggest thing holding you back from making an even greater impact on your campus? Time, tools, support from higher ups? Or what are your words of wisdom for those who are listening right now who may not be registrars, but want to be a modern registrar, want to move into that role? What is the 2 or 3 things that you think they need to start paying attention to now as they prepare for that role? And I think that'll pretty much wrap us up because we are at 49 after.
Well, I'll say, oh, Doug, and then you. I'm going right. Then you. What I would say, if someone would like to be a registrar, and I applaud anyone saying, "Oh, I'd like to be a registrar," and dispelling the sense that no one in their right mind would ever think of this as a career, because it's the best job ever, the best job ever. And so I would say, make connections across institutions, because that's what we say we do. And so whatever position you might be in now, if the experience you have is making connections across the institution, relying on your colleagues across other institutions and solving problems, then that's You know, those are the things I would want someone to say who was interviewing for a registrar job. Doug, what would you say?
I would just remind everyone that the registrar's office is a service office. And so we serve our entire campus communities, students, faculty, staff, other student services offices, alumni. We assist with admissions in some cases. And so it's really the entirety of an institution's reach is serviced by the registrar's office. And you have to kind of like doing that to be good at it or to stay with it. And so in a lot of ways, being a registrar is like a vocation. It's not just a job, and it's not just a job on a boat, but it's, you know, it's a job at an institution where every day something is different. We do a lot of the same processes, you know, on a cycle, but I come to work and I don't have 2 days that are exactly the same. And so you have to be committed to providing service, and you have to be pretty flexible with how you go about doing that, because everybody from all over is going to ask a question that you've never heard of before, or they're going to want something that, you know, oh, all right, well, let's slot that into these other, you know, 55 different things that are currently going on. So it's a great job. I love being a registrar. I don't know that I would tell someone who's thinking about becoming a registrar. It's also not like, don't get in it for the money. That's a
Doug, I have to chime in and say I love Sherry Phillips' reference to Olivia Pope. For those who watch Scandal, that is kind of the perfect analogy of a registrar, right? Tying all the pieces together, cleaning up all of the little messes that can result. But I drag people into this profession, right? We have the opportunity to touch a lot of talent in our own offices. And so I drag people into the profession by identifying those who are very service oriented and like solving puzzles, right? Every day is like a puzzle for us. And how do you put all these pieces together? It's very rewarding, because the end outcome is something that's pretty beautiful for a student and a student's, you know, a student's future. So yeah, I think most of us fall into this, but when you love it, right?
And even when you're there, you have allies like me, right? That value the work that you do, because without you identifying the friction or the need to change policy, then a lot of what we do become just sort of mundane. And as a faculty member as well, it's always important to have good partners who are looking at data and processes that we don't pay attention to because we're so caught up in the curriculum and delivering that. So just to be engaged with all of you, and at my own institution, all of my colleagues who are registrars who continue to say, Carolyn, this needs to be looked at. You need to explore this. So kudos to registrars and anybody that wants to be able to go into it to impact change for students in the long term at all levels. Even after a student graduates, they still call the registrar to get their transcript or to get their diploma or a copy of something else, right? So they're there from the beginning to the end.
One of the things that I often hear is, you know, registrars they're all about detail. It's just, you know, they have their heads down, they only do the work. But what I have found is that, yeah, the detail is really important, but you also have to have a 20,000 foot view of what's the impact of this thing we're doing. And that's about knowing your institution. So that whole working with the other student facing departments is going to make a huge difference in understanding, okay, we can do this and this will be good for us, but look how it's going to affect financial aid or the business office or advising or, you know, any number of other places. So that 20,000 foot view coupled with the attention to detail, we are a unique lot, I think, those of us that love to be registrars.
And Victoria, I think it's that view, but then also honoring the past, but then also remembering that 20 years from now, someone's going to have to explain this to people. And so I think about how are we making this decision now? And then like, how is whoever comes next going to understand this? And so that record keeping and those details are important because it continues, and we're the ones that have to keep that history for the students.
Thank you, everyone. I want to try to synthesize what I've heard here today, and then I'm going to ask you a simple round robin that's a one-word answer question here. What I'm hearing, the modern registrar and the way that they transform the institution, and clearly a modern registrar who has been given the voice and empowerment at the institution can actually transform institutional processes and policies and focus on student-centric orientations, because the registrar, the modern registrar, it really still, I mean, even the old school registrar touched a lot of things from the time a student entered the institution till when they're alumni. They're still asking for their transcripts, so you're still engaged with them. And that's one of the few departments that does that throughout the student life cycle. So I'm hearing you have to be flexible. You have to be technologically savvy. You have to have the ability to see systems. You have to have the ability to see details. You have the ability to be a non-political, a politically savvy but non-political negotiator. You have to have the ability to build interpersonal relationships and manage those both this way and this way. You have to be able to understand that students don't speak from the same language that we do, and how that influences everything you do. Et cetera, right? So it's a very complex job. The modern registrar holds a very complex position within the organization. But I wanted to actually offer, if I missed something key, please go ahead and put that in the chat there. But if you can give me, before we sign off here, a one-word description that describes your current role or the role of the registrar at your institution. And one word.
Insider.
I didn't prep them for this. Insider?
Yes.
Okay.
Partner.
Collaborator.
I didn't prep them with this question, so I'm because it's hard to say in one word.
Collaborator is a good one. I think servant also comes to mind.
Advocate, adaptable. I see that. I put somebody who's hyphenated one, heart of the college, a hyphenated one word there.
I would add a doer. A doer.
Yeah, I would add mentor, thinking about how we educate our campus, our students, our teams, even our academic units, mentoring them and what it takes to efficiently support an academic infrastructure.
I'm seeing guardian, liaison, resourceful, advocate. These are all very positive words. So that bodes well for the profession, I think.
Listener.
Listener, partner, encourager.
I'm switching, Wendy, from doer to door opener.
Oh, there you go. Well, doer is just good too, but door opener, yeah. Like another hyphenated one. All right, thank you very much. We are pretty much on the hour. I see if we have any open questions here. We have DegreeWorks, okay, Heart of the College, and we have somebody else saying they use DegreeWorks. I don't think we have any open questions.
Julia, doer is just an abbreviated form of door opener. Doer.
That's true. Anyone else want to say anything last minute here? We have like 60 seconds. No?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Wendy, for convening us.
Yeah, thank all the AACRAO people that made this happen. I just had to click on a click. That's all I had to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you all. And please, for those of you listening, if you want to send us, Christina, me, anybody else, direct questions, go ahead and ask them. But from the AACRAO perspective, if this is something you want to hear, more panelist discussions about the professions, about the roles that we help support within AACRAO, please let us know. Or if we want to do this one again and continue this conversation, because it's obviously an interesting one to a lot of people. Thank you very much. Hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining. To our panelists, again, thank you for the energy and time and commitment. And to all of you guys who are watching, your jobs are so important. Thank you for the work that you do at your institutions. For those of you guys who are interested in watching a recording of this webinar, it will be made available on our webinars archive page, probably within 2-3 business days, give or take. So I just dropped the link in the chat. But again, on behalf of AACRAO, on behalf of our panelists, thank you for your time. Thank you for all that you guys do. I'm wishing you guys a fantastic rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.